All right, good evening. Good to see everyone. 8:35 we'll start. It's already late. Again, our goals we'll try to end by 9:15. And again, thank you everyone for joining us for part two of our learning together of the Book of Rut as we get ready for Shavuot. The title for the share this evening, for learning this evening, is the most important part of the Book of Rut that very few people talk about, are willing to talk about, forget how he wrote it exactly. And you won't have to wait too long to understand to what I am referring. But let's see if we can figure it out ourselves together. The Book of Rut's a short story, and like many short stories, it kind of begins with a problem. Elimelech leaves, they leave to Moab, he and the sons die, and Naomi and then with Ruth are left alone, and they are widows, and they are poor, and they're lonely and isolated. They're not welcomed back when they move back to Beit Lechem, and that's kind of the problem. They don't have, financial security, physical protection, social support, so to speak. And then by the end of the book, we'll have reached sort of the solution, right? By the end of the book, Ruth is happily married, and there's a baby, and the women are standing around Naomi and wishing her Mazel Tov on her new grandson. And everything has been resolved. Everything has been solved. So we begin sort of with this problem, right? And we end with this solution, happily ever after. And so there are 4 chapters that kind of get us there. Okay. So the question is, when does sort of the problem really end? And when do we transition to, if not yet the solution, but the sort of, at least we're on the path to the solution? Where is that transition? We would expect it to be somewhere in the middle of the book, approximately, somewhere in the middle, right? So anyone want to unmute and just tell me what you'd think? People who kind of, remember the story well enough, in particular, where is sort of that turning point in the book? Anyone want to take a stab at it?
Probably when Ruth goes to the, stay Boaz and kind of encounters him for the first time.
For the first time, okay, you could say that one. Okay, so she goes to the field, and he gets at least part of the solution, because ultimately he sees her, he's kind to her, he says, "Don't worry, I'll provide you with food and with, I guess, physical protection." He tells his workers, don't harm her, don't, etc. Okay, but that's stage 1, but that doesn't totally solve the problem, because, right, if the story would end there, she would still be left, they would be alone, there'd be no child. Okay, that's one possibility. What would be the other possibility?
I always thought the turning point was in the middle of the negotiations with the other Goel, who then backs out of it. But
okay, you're right. This is not what I was going to say there. It's another good. So once that's towards the end of the book. That will be in the last parak, when Boaz has already said, in theory, "I'm willing to marry you, Ruth," but there's another relative closer that would be more appropriate. We should first ask him. And they ask him, Ploni Almoni. At first he says, "I will," but then he says no. And then Boaz can step in. So at that point, that's towards the very end of the book. That'll be like the last 10 psukim or so. Any other, anyone else can think of any sort of critical moment? So maybe you won't agree with me, and it's not necessary for this thesis either. But many point to the scene, which is really almost exact the middle of the book, as the turning point scene, is the scene where Ruth, goes down to Boaz at night on the threshing floor. And if we would have a whole book laid out in front of us, you would see that really is almost dead center in the book. If you don't remember this scene in particular, we're going to see it inside. For those, it's become very popular to organize things, parts of Tanakh in a chiastic structure, A, B, C, B, A, right, with sort of a center piece and then rings around it. The whole book can be organized in a way that will be the center ring when Boaz and Ruth encounter one another at the threshing floor. So let's see that scene. Now, many would argue that that is the turning point scene. No one here suggests that it's not necessary. If it's not the turning point scene, it's certainly a critical scene. Let's look at that scene. So we're going to read, I don't know, just 10 psukim together. I'll put it up on the screen, and we'll certainly be open to any observations from what people think about after we read it together. But then I have some sources to point us in a certain direction as well. Oh, I have to first share the screen. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so hopefully everyone sees this. So this is Perek Gimel. What has happened until this point? Boaz has, offered protection and food to Ruth and Naomi, and they're safe and protected in that sense. But then Vatomer la Nami chamosa. Nami, her mother-in-law, says to Ruth, Biti, my daughter, Halo avakesh lach manoach asher yitav lach. Let me try to find you a home that will be good for you. If you stay with me, I'm getting old. I'm not gonna be here forever. You're gonna be left alone. Viata halo Boaz modatanu Boaz, who's our relative, asher hayitet narotav, that you are with his young women. Okay. Tonight is the night that everyone is winnowing their barley harvest on the threshing floor outside. And they work their harvest all day, and then there's a humongous pile of grain. You can't leave it there unattended. It'll be stolen. So the men sleep by their grain to protect it. V'rachatzt v'sacht v'samt simlotayach. Bathe, anoint yourself, dress in a beautiful dress. V'yaradet hagoren, and go down to the threshing floor. Al tivadi laish. Do not let yourself be known to anyone. To the man, do not let yourself be known. Do not reveal yourself to Boaz. Ad kalatola achov lishtod, until he finishes eating and drinking. And from the context, that seems to mean wine, and he'll at least be somewhat drunk. Do not reveal yourself until he has drunk his wine. Vihi b'shachvo, and then when he will lie down. V'yadat et makom asher yishkav sham, and you know where he will be going to sleep. Uvat v'gilit margalotav, you shall go and literally uncover his legs, pull up the blanket, v'shachav, and lie down next to him. V'hu yagilach et asher tasin, and he will tell you what to do. V'tomar leha, and Ruth says to Naomi, kol asher tomri esel, exactly what you say I'll do. V'teret hagor, and she goes down to the threshing floor. V'task kol asher tzivat chamota, she did exactly as she was told. V'yochel Boaz v'yesht v'yitav libo, and Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was good. That means there was some alcohol. V'yavo lishkav b'ksei ha'arema, and he went to lie down at the edge of the pile. V'tavo balat, and then she secretly went, v'tegal marglotav v'tishkaf, and pulled up the blanket, uncovered his legs, and lie down. And he hasn't noticed her yet, maybe because he drank too much. He's asleep. V'hi b'chatzi halayla, v'yecharad ha'ish v'yila fate. And then in the middle of the night, the man, it's interesting how it keeps referring to Boaz as the man. The man is frightened, maybe startled. V'yila fate. That is a hard word. There is perhaps this word, this root, perhaps appears one other time in all of Tanakh. It's debatable if it's the same root. Many understand that the root lamed pei tuf is related to the root pei tuf lamed, petil, which means wrapped or twisted, like petil techelet is a twisted string of tchelas. So vayila fate is, and he twisted, he turned over. V'hinei isha shochevet marglotav. And behold, there is a woman lying next to his legs. Vayomer, and he says, Mi at, who are you? Vatomer, and she says, Anochi Ruth amatacha, I am Ruth, your maidservant. You know me. Ufarasta knafecha al amatcha. Will you please spread your robe over your maidservant, which is a euphemism for marriage, for the union of man and woman. Ki goelata, for you are my redeemer. As an aside, as a tangent, this phrase "spread over your cloth," this is a source that some have the minhag under the chuppah. Yakis have this minhag. Some Sfardim have this minhag. If anyone has ever seen this, that the chassan and kala stand literally underneath sharing a talis. I'm sure some people have seen this. So it's based on this phrase. And also, this is why every chuppah, the top of a chuppah is supposed to be cloth to fill this pasuk, that sort of the cloth, the beged, is spread over the couple. Okay, so she says, "I am your maidservant. Spread your cloth over me." Vayomer, he says, "Brucha at Lashem, you are blessed to Hashem biti. Hey, tavta chasecha achram nerishon, you've done even greater kindness to not go after the young men, to want to marry the more proper person, the brother of your or the relative of your deceased husband. Vata biti al tiri, do not be afraid. Kol asher tomri asalach, whatever you say, I will do." This is the flip. She had said to her mother-in-law, whatever Nami says, Ruth says, I will do. Ruth was the follower. Now he's saying, no, I'll follow you. Everyone knows you're a righteous woman. However, there's a closer redeemer. It's not right for us to marry him, immediately. Lini halayla, stay here the night. And we'll see if he will be willing to marry you. Fine. Chai Hashem, by the life of God, I swear. And if not, and if he doesn't, so then ugal tich, so then I will marry you. And she stays there all night, and she gets up in the morning, and just before dawn, she escapes and goes back to Naomi. Okay. So this is the scene. There's a lot we can discuss. Any reactions? Anyone want to share anything? Anyone notice something that they've never noticed before?
Well, I see there are a bunch of cases of Kri Uktiv, and I'm not quite sure what all of the differences mean, but it seems like part of the meaning here is being obfuscated.
Okay. Okay, very good. Anyone else have any comments?
I thought when she said
Yeah.
ufarashta, that's like past tense, and she was implying that he's already done it when he gave her special treatment earlier. Not that go ahead and do it. She's sort of saying you've already done it.
So I don't know. This is actually subtle biblical grammar, which I don't know well enough, but I think it means future. It's like ve'achalta. Ve'achalta also means, and you shall eat, you will eat. I think here it's the future. I mean, that's how they translate it. That's how it's typically understood. But yes. So what was she doing? What was the plan here? I mean, so Nami is sending her. The Tanakh is written in a minimalist style always, all the more so when we're dealing with, sensitive or modest material. The Torah, even more so, will have a sense of tznius. Right, but she was, sent, to seduce him, basically. And Nami thought that, it was to entice Boaz that night, and then that would force him to then to take her as his wife permanently. Right? Isn't that more or less the plan? Anyone understand it differently? And many point out that, again, as modest as the Tanakh will be, I don't know if many, but I've seen commentaries point out, look at this one pasuk. V'hi b'shachva, when he will lie down. V'yadat et hamakom, and he will know the place. Asher yishkaf, from where he will lie down. Uvad v'kilit marglotav, and you will uncover his legs. So all of those words can be understood literally, but all of those words are also euphemisms in Tanakh for sexual relations. Shachlo can mean lie, literally just lie down, lie on a couch, but it can also mean lie in a sexual context. Viadat et hamakom, which is kind of superfluous in the pasuk. Yodea is the same, can be used in the same way. Yishkav, again, vigilit mark lotav, literally just means lift up and uncover his legs, but right, ligalot erva, right, has the same connotation. So she went there again for righteous intentions. Again, it was obviously not for promiscuous intentions, but she was going to, seduce him, entice him, and we read the psukim as like, okay, then we go to the next pasuk, and Boaz kind of says like, no, thank you, kind of like he's just, turning down a cup of soda. But, if we, imagine this, what it really was like, in the dark, again, I'm just translating psukim, but she was bathed and anointed and dressed beautifully. And, she's basically lying down in the bed next to him, and, with her intentions obvious. It was even if Boaz somehow knew in his head it wasn't the right thing to do, it was an incredible test for him to hold himself back, to control himself. And that's certainly how Chazal saw this. Let's read a couple midrashim together. Medrash says, "Vayila fate." Again, that difficult word. So some understand it to mean turn over, right? Again, turn back and forth. The Medrash understands it as lifatatu kachazazit. Vayila fate, if we're going to deal with grammar right, is passive. And so literally it's, and he was lafat, whatever lafat means. So the Medrash understands that lifatatu means she embraced him. It means literally it would be he was embraced, would be the literal grammatical translation of vayila fate. So it's saying she embraced him kachazazit. Lefet is like a kind of like saras. So it means she like embraced him. It's not the nicest way of just saying it, but like some kind of like she like wrapped him around like a skin growth. Mm. What does that mean? So according to the Medrash, she's saying she was holding him. Hischil memash bisara, and he begins to feel her hair. Amar, and he says, Ruchos ein lahem seyar. Ruchos here means spirits. According to the Medrash, she like wasn't sure, is this a human woman? Is this some kind of spirit? And he says, spirits don't have hair. Apparently, I don't know. That was a known thing that spirits don't have hair. Amar la miyat, and he says, who are you? Are you a human? Are you a spirit? Ruach o isha, are you a spirit or woman? Amar isha, says, I'm a woman. Pinuya ato eshat ich, are you an unmarried or married? Amar, I am unmarried. Tomato tahora, I mean, is she a nida or not? Amar lo tahor, no, I'm permitted. V'hinei isha tahora mikol anashim shechavet marglotav, and the purest of women, this holy, righteous Ruth, was lying next to him, and that was his test.
Isn't it kind of accepted though that Boaz was very old at the time?
That is one interpretation. Chazal didn't have that interpretation. So you're right. Well, let's see. We'll work with Chazal. This is a Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Tokfel shel Yosef anve tanuto shel Boaz, the strength of Yosef, meaning as great of a challenge that Yosef overcame, meaning with Eshet Potiphar, and he didn't give in to his desire. Anvanetusho shel Boaz means it's like nothing compared to what Boaz had to overcome. Tokfo shel Boaz, and however strong the challenge of Boaz was, Anvetanuto shel Palti ben Laish. It was nothing compared to Palti ben Laish, someone else who won't deal with him. Tokfo shel Yosef. What was the great challenge of Yosef? The pasuk says, "Vayhi b'chatzi halayla." It was in the middle of the night. V'yacharat ha'ish, and the man was startled. Vayila fate, right? That was again that difficult word. My vayila fate. What does that mean? Vayila fate. Amar Rav. Rav said, "Shenasa bisaro karashe lefatot." The Gemara also is going to speak and trying to speak in a modest way, but it means his flesh became. Here is translated lefatot as a turnip, like the head of a turnip, which means, we'll try to be modest, that he was physically aroused. He had to control himself, and he did. And Chazal sees that it was a stronger challenge than Yosef with Potiphar's wife. The same kind of challenge, but even stronger. So at least according to Chazal, at the center of this book of Rut, which we normally think of as all about kindness and chesed, which of course it is. But they see in the center of the book, on the one hand, it's in the psukim. There is this encounter between man and woman in the middle of the night. But Chazal on some level maybe accentuated what the test was, that they acted, with self-restraint and in a pure and holy way, and this was the test at the center of the book. So on the one hand, what I sort of just want to sort of open up people's eyes to, and you can see why this is not something which can be included in sort of the as children are introduced into the story, but this is also part of the book. At the just to think about that this is also part of the story, another layer to it. But additionally, so the question that this leads to is like why? This doesn't seem to be the theme of the book. It's not a book about, at first glance, it's not a book about I don't know, sexual morality or immorality. And it's not really necessary for the story. I mean, maybe this is just how it happened, but we could have imagined the story that without this seduction in the middle of the night, Nami goes to Rut and she says, Rut, go to Boaz when he's coming home from the field and, say you want to marry him. And we could have had the same story, and Boaz would say, I'd love to marry you, O Eshet Chaya, but we first need to ask the other family member, the Goel. Why do we have, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Why is this part of the story? And how does it fit with the rest of the themes of the book? I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts? I'm going to share some things, but honestly, I'm not fully satisfied with my understanding of it. Maybe people think you can say you're totally crazy, and people think that like I'm totally blowing something out of proportion, and this is not, what they think is going on here.
I think it has at least two different meanings. There's certainly the physical and the man-woman, but then there's the portentousness of the words, Vayhi b'chatzi halayla. That always has a big capital letter and a red star with it.
Excellent. And before you continue, Justin, I just want to highlight that, meaning, because that just goes to show you that the book is trying to say, like, and it was at midnight, like, this is it. This is like at least a key moment in the story, right? Are you
in our people, right? The Chatzi Halayla is in Yetziat Mitzrayim, and with Achashverosh, it's a big thing.
Absolutely. So right, so that I think just highlights what I'm saying, is that you see like it's saying the critical moment in the story, it wasn't a moment when someone was tested, would they be kind or not, which is what the theme of the book seems to be. would the rich man be willing to give up his palace to, let the poor stay there? Whatever great challenge you can imagine in a book themed about kindness. That's not it. This critical moment in the story, right, is about something totally different, about a totally different kind of moral challenge. Okay, so anyone else? Any other thoughts?
My only small thought there is like when you mentioned Yosef, it's like the story about Potiphar is not there to teach us necessarily a lesson on like sexual morality, but it's like part of a bigger story about Yosef being away from his home and like having to keep his Judaism and his values. So that just makes me think like that's probably a key to the answer here. Like it's part of a larger context. I'm not sure what that larger context is, but that just makes me like go in that direction.
I think you're right. I agree. I haven't quite figured that out yet either. So,
okay.
But I think you are right. I think you are right. Okay, so let me just share a couple things. So, we already find the ideas I'm about to share in Midrashim, but commentaries of today, of the last generation, have really sort of dug and found a lot of really incredible ideas by noticing that the story of Boaz and Ruth seemed to be very similar to some other stories in Tanakh and in Chumash in particular. Okay, so there's a few that we could say here. So let's see what people can think of. A woman.
Yehuda and Tamar.
Yehuda and Tamar, excellent. Okay, right? Very similar. Tamar, her husband has died, and she wants the child to continue the line, and she gets dressed up and hides her identity, and encounters Yehuda. Excellent. And the people of this story, by the way, are descendants of that union, because then they have Peretz and who's the other one? Tamar, Zarach, right? And then, but we know from the genealogy of the end of Ruth that Boaz was from Peretz. So Boaz is even from that event of Yehuda and Tamar. Very good. What other story in Chumash can you think of? Right again. So someone they need of a child, and they sort of go to someone else at night to father the child. So they say
Lot's daughters.
It's Lot and
Lot, excellent. Lot and his
and
daughters.
Ruth, of course, is a descendant of
Excellent.
Lot
And
his
Ruth
younger
is a
daughter.
descendant, right? Ruth is from Moab, which is right. We're descendants of Lot and his daughters, right? Lot. So again, you have women. They don't have husbands. They need a child there because they think there's no one else around. They need to continue the line. And Lot, they have drink wine, which also is another parallel to this story. If Boaz is drinking wine, as it seems, and right in the middle, kind of in the night, to approach him and to father a child. Excellent. So let's briefly just see two psukim from each of those stories. And again, so this story, right, is like, right, are those two lines are converging, right? The line of descendants that emerged from Lot and his daughters, and the line of descendants that emerged from Yehuda and Tamar, this is where they are crossing. Now, once we realize just in general that those two stories loom behind the story of Ruth and Boaz, right, we can understand already immediately on some level why we're not surprised that these kinds of issues are going to be coming up in the book. None of this are my observations. Again, you could see this a lot, Yael Ziegler's book on Ruth. She's not the first one either, but so let me share my screen, and we'll just briefly look at just a couple of psukim from each of those stories. Okay, so this is Lot and his daughters. V'tomar habachira el etzira, and the older sister says to the younger sister, even that kind of is parallel of Naomi speaking to Ruth and giving directions to Ruth. Avinu Zakin, our father's old, V'ishem ba'aretz, and there's no other man. Lavo aleinu kederech kol haaretz, to be other father or child. L'cha nashket Avinu yain v'nishkava imo. Let's give him wine to drink, and then we will lie with him. Unechayem Avinu zara, and then we will bring life from our father. Vatashkenat Avinu yain ba'layla hu, and they gave him wine. Vatavo habachira vatishkav elavia, and the older one went and she lied with her father. Velo yada b'shechva uvukuma, and he did not know of her lying down and her getting up. Then it just repeats itself. Then the younger one does it. Velo yada b'shechva uvukuma, and he did not know who it was. He did not know what had happened. And then let me remember. Is it in? No, is it Lamed Chet? Yes. And then Yehuda and Tamar. She also, there's a whole important thing of she gets dressed up in certain kinds of clothes, which is reminiscent of Ruth. Vayete leha el derech, vayomer havana avo elayich ki lo yada ki chalatohi. Again, Yehuda is unaware, for he did not know, ki lo yada, he did not know who the woman was. Okay. And so it's interesting when you look back at, there are some phrases in Ruth Perek Gimel that, could be alluding to those stories. Naomi had instructed Ruth, al tivadi laish, right? Do not let yourself be known to the man, like be like, on some level, be like the daughters of Lot and Tamar, who were not known. Their identities were hidden. And of course, though, Vayat, right, when Boaz realizes what's going on, there's a stress on, he wants to know who this woman is. Who are you? What is your identity? What is your name? And so, this scene, can be seen as, right, sort of like the tikkun, right, of like, there was Lot and the daughters, there was certainly something wrong. That was certainly, seen as sinful on some level. Tamar and Yehuda, it's more complicated. We don't criticize Tamar really, but Yehuda, right, is not seen in a good light in that story. And then in this story, the man Boaz, sort of like rectifies those errors, or in some ways you could say like purifies, the genealogies, if these are sort of, so to speak, the spiritual roots and the actual lines of ancestry that will produce David and, Malchus-based David and Mashiach. And so, this scene, part of the reason why it's so critical, right, is because of these sort of other, these other events, which are, at the root of both Yehuda, which Boaz is from, and root coming from Moab, which is the story of the daughters of Lot, and Lot. So that's one just fascinating, very interesting, kind of undercurrent here. Any thoughts, any questions? Because I'm not sure if this still totally answers our questions of sort of how is this integrated into the rest of the book.
Question, Rabbi?
Yes, please.
Do you think, is it specifically because he's male that it's like a tikkun, or is it just in general?
Right. I'm not sure. I thought about that. It's the male side needed the tikkun more.
Yeah,
right. In some ways, you could read this as, when you read these with those words in the background, you could almost read it as maybe really it wasn't right what Naomi did, sending Ruth there. I'm not thought. But I'm not sure. I could see it in either way.
Interesting.
I was thinking about that a little bit. I'll share one other thing that sort of I noticed in this sort of this scene, and I'm not sure all these things fit together. I'm hoping people will help me. Ruth is incredibly passive in this scene, even though on the one hand, what she's doing is incredibly brave on one level, but Naomi sends her. Vayomar Eleha, and Ruth said, Kol asher tomri, so okay, whatever you do, whatever you say, I'll do. And then she goes to Boaz, and Boaz says, who are you? Right? She's this is not a 21st century marriage. Vatomer, and she says, Anochi Ruth Amatecha. I am Ruth, your handmaiden, I don't know, your Ufarasik Nefecha Alamatcha, spread your robe over me, for you are my redeemer. Right? She's basically throwing herself at him, and she's saying, I am this, damsel in distress, not even, right, that you need to save. And I'm your Amatecha. Now, what's interesting is that Boaz totally flips it. And I wonder if this is somehow has to do with everything here also. What does Boaz say? Boaz says, Vayomer Bruchat Lashem. You are the blessed of God. Right? You're looking for me to save you. Right? You're the great doer of kindness. What the unfortunately say, right? Her earlier kindness was that whatever she was kind with Nami, and now you've been kind to come to me. You could have gone to the young men, which is a little strange, by the way, because most people didn't like her and the Moabites. But at least what he's saying is he's like saying thank you. You're the generous, kind one. Saving me basically. Vatan, and he says so. He does call her my daughter. Don't worry. Kol asher tomri eselach. Whatever you say, I'll do. Right? He's putting himself like beneath her. Right? He's saying, I will do as you say. So there seems to be some sort of, change going on there also. And maybe Ruth sort of didn't have the right perspective on herself. She saw herself as someone who needed to be saved, and he's saying, no, you don't. You're not in need to be saved. You're the Eshet Chayil. He calls her. You're the Brucha La Hashem. You're almost saving me by doing a kindness of coming to me. So at this critical moment, that also seems to be kind of a shift that is going on here.
Rabbi, that almost reminds me.
One final comment. Yes. Oh, yes, please. Is that you, William?
Yes. Sorry. That almost reminds me of Yehuda saying "Tzadka mimeni" when he realizes that it was Tamar who was the so-called prostitute.
Interesting. Yeah, I hear. One other, just one final small comment, and this connects back to what we discussed last time. Right, B'yemei Shvot HaShoftim. That's how the book begins, and it was in the time when the Shoftim were ruling, and sort of we were discussing that, those few words carry with it sort of a lot of baggage in imagining, sort of describing what kind of time era it was. So we spoke about it was an era that was incredibly tumultuous, an era of sliding into Avodah Zarah, an era of great battles and warriors. But it is also true, there are many stories in Shoftim of sexual immorality, whether it's a story of, Shimshon being seduced or Pilegesh Begiva. So, this also could be read sort of in that way also. By Hibi Meshvot Shoftim. It was a time when really there was promiscuity, sexual immorality, sexual abuse, and but during that time, this was a story of, two people who were pure and holy, who had self-restraint, and it was from them again that that the line of David HaMelech would be created. So that's again just another little piece. So it's 9:15. I'm not sure if I've put all the pieces together at all, but maybe this is just something to think about, something to realize this other layer of the story that it requires a somewhat more delicate discussion, and so it's not discussed as much. But in the center of the book, again, there is this critical moment, this critical scene in the middle of the night in the threshing floor with Boaz and Ruth lying next to each other, and so to speak, they pass the test. And many explaining this was sort of a tikkun for the events of Yehuda and Tamar and Lot and the daughters, and maybe this was a tikkun for the whole period of the Shoftim. I still think there's a lot more there to be mined, which I haven't quite figured out. But hopefully, again, this is just a little bit more to think about when we'll be reading Ruth on Shavuos. All right, anyone, again, feel free to sign off. Anyone has anything else, questions, comments? Yes, Nelson.
Rabbi, an extremely naive question. Central to everything you've been saying is that Yehuda required that a tikkun be made on his behalf.
Yeah.
Given that Yehuda didn't know and couldn't possibly have known that Tamar was his daughter-in-law,
Right.
why isn't he utterly blameless?
Right.
Why isn't he utterly blameless? And therefore, why did he need a tikkun?
Right. So I think the answer to that is a very good question. The answer is you're right. He was unaware that it was Tamar, but there are many levels to answer the question. First of all, he thought, she was a prostitute. He thought she was a prostitute. So,
but in biblical times, that couldn't possibly have been viewed as an offense.
Okay, that possibly, okay. But I guess the point is, though, is that okay, fair enough. But I would still say that the sin was that, right, he had mistreated Tamar, right? Meaning because he didn't let whichever brother was left to marry her, and he had kind of thrown her out, whatever it is, right? And because of that, so then ultimately it led to, him being with her. So you're right, sort of in the moment, he was unaware, right? But ultimately it was sort of his actions that led to that situation.
Yes, but not the sexual actions that did require the tikkun of nach on the one hand, etc.
Yeah, I hear, even though it all sort of was mixed up in issues of marriage, but you're right. I hear. I have to think about it more. It's a fair point.
And one last absurd point, a wonderful pun that I don't think you were aware you were making. This talk could have been entitled "The Roots of Root."
The roots of Root. Yeah, I didn't. Okay, very good. Thank you.
I was thinking more in terms of that it's Tikkun Leil Shavuos.
Yeah, okay. That's another pun. Okay, yasher koach, everyone. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, all right. Wonderful seeing everyone. Have a good night. Good Shabbos. Good Yom Tov. I don't see
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Good
Yeah,
Yom.
good Shabbos. Good to see everyone.